Before we begin, the Differently Brained team acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we record, edit, and stream this podcast. We pay our respects to all First Nations peoples and their elders, past, present, and emerging. We extend that respect to all First Nations cultures and their ongoing connection to the lands, waterways, and communities. Now on with the show. Hello everyone, welcome back to Differently Brained. It's a podcast and you're listening to it, and it's also a podcast where no brain is the same. I'm Lachlan Rutherford.
And I'm Jacinta Dietrich, and we have a lovely returning guest again today, which is super exciting. So we have Jess Flint back on the show. You guys might remember Jess from the episode where we chatted with her and her mum Bonnie, which was absolutely so exciting, and our first and only double guest episode. So go and listen to that first if you haven't already. But Jess is a writer, cake decorator, gamer, roller skater, and an advocate for accurate autistic representation in media. She lives in Melbourne with her girlfriend, a cat, and 2 rabbits. Welcome back, Jess.
Hi. How's it going?
Pretty good. How's it going with you?
Oh, it's really cold this morning. I finally got to break out the fluffy onesie. It was great.
Oh, lovely. I'm perpetually back in the Oodie again now. The weather has got to the point where I live in an Oodie and my heat pack is getting just some ridiculous time in the microwave.
Oh, yeah, same.
Since we last spoke to you, you've had a bit of another diagnostic journey.
Yes.
Can you tell us what has happened?
Okay, well, this is something that I've sort of had on the back burner for like the last 9 or 10 years, and I'll go into that a bit in a second. But I got diagnosed with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. What is it, like 3 weeks ago now? It was May 17th. So...
Okay.
Yeah.
So fresh.
I know. And I only just got like the actual written diagnosis in the mail on Wednesday, like just gone.
Oh, wonderful. You got a little certificate.
Yep.
We haven't spoken about it on the show before. So for any listeners who don't know, what is it?
Okay, so it's actually like a collection of 13 different subtypes of connective tissue disorders. And the one I've been diagnosed with, hypermobile EDS, is the most common type. And it's the only one that doesn't have a genetic test for it yet.
Okay.
Oh, so there's genetic tests for the other ones?
Yes.
That's really interesting, but not for
Some of the other ones
hypermobile.
have only got like a very, very small handful of people, like maybe 5 to 10 people that have been diagnosed with it as well. So it really is like a very big spectrum.
So what does... Sorry, I need to get the correct pronunciation out. What does...
I don't really know how to pronounce it either. I'm just reading it as I see it.
Oh, okay, yeah, well, fair enough. How does Ehlers-Danlos syndrome kind of manifest? How does it play out for you? What do you experience?
For me?
Yeah, for you.
Okay, so I'm not overly flexible and bendy, despite the name hypermobile. Like, I mean, I never really was overly flexible and bendy. You know how, like, there's always that one kid that can, like, put their leg behind their head when you're in primary school? I was never that kid. But it turns out that with hypermobility, you don't necessarily have to be flexible, because hypermobility is your body being able to hyperextend your joints like beyond their natural range of movement.
Right.
And so that leads to a lot of instability, and the muscles around that joint will actually compensate by firing all the time to try and stabilize it. And so that leads to stiffness, like, you know, inflexibility, and it also leads to exhaustion because your body's working so much harder than it should.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'd always assumed, that hypermobile meant super bendy, super flexible.
Yeah.
I hadn't even considered that it could flow the other way and that it would lead to, inflexibility and stiffness and things like that, because now that you've said it, of course, your muscles are working so much harder to keep everything in place, and I assume not dislocate your joints all the time.
Exactly. But the other thing is that because it's a connective tissue disorder, most people don't think about the fact that connective tissue is everywhere in your body. It's, your organs, it's like your gums, it's, like your eyes, it's everything. Basically, in anything that's not like hard and stiff like bone, there's going to be connective tissue in it.
Yeah.
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 So literally impacts your entire body because it is
Yes.
your entire body.
Yes.
Is it pain? Is that how it manifests, or is it like exhaustion?
There's a lot of different ways that it manifests, actually. A lot of it is chronic pain, because if you're hyperextending your joints, then that's going to hurt after a while.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's also things like gastrointestinal problems, because, that's all soft tissue in there. And it's things like migraines because of like the soft tissue in your neck getting compressed.
Jeez, yeah, okay.
Oh.
Different things, yeah. But to go back to what you were asking, how does it look for me personally? So, like I said, never like the party trick flexible person, like ever. I did ballet as a kid, but like I could never fully get into the splits. And I realize now that that's because my body was overcompensating and the muscles were not allowing me to go further. I've got like a really bendy lower back. Like in a lot of my early childhood pictures, you can see me standing there like with my stomach pushed forward because I'm like pushing my lower back in too much. So my fingertips, they'll bend back at an angle. Not like an extreme angle, but I mean, like other people would be showing off how far they could bend their fingers back at school. And I'd be like, well, look at this. And they'd be like, well, that's nothing. Why are you trying to join in? I don't know. They were little assholes. Yeah, didn't have the best time at school, as you know. I just wanted to be included. So, yeah, like my fingertips bend backwards at an angle. My thumb can bend quite a way back, sort of past the point of extension. When I hit puberty, I got covered in stretch marks, like well beyond the normal amount of puberty stretch marks.
Right.
I was very self-conscious about that.
Yeah.
Because, I went to Mum and I was like, Mum, what are all these red things? They're everywhere. And she said, oh, well, that's just a part of puberty. But, like, it's normal. And then when we'd have, like, swimming class or something, I'd sort of be comparing myself to everybody else and I'd be like, but they don't have that many. And the result was that I stopped going to swimming class because I didn't want to give bullies more fodder. Yeah, I mean, you know what the early 2000s was like. It was all body shaming.
Yeah. Is that because the connective tissue was working so hard constantly? And
it's because your skin is very stretchy too.
Okay.
Oh, so you've got like stretchy skin.
Not everywhere. It varies from person to person. But yes, the stretchiest skin that I have is on the back of my hand and on my forearm.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. But some people can stretch it out like really far. What else? Oh, yeah. So I don't remember how old I was, but old enough to get embarrassed. I was wearing shorts at home one day and one of Mum's friends was like, what's wrong with Jessica's legs? They're all splotchy, because they were like a bit purple and mottled looking. And I just stopped wearing shorts when we had company over because I was like, I don't want you to comment on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would, like, this was after I hit puberty, I would just sweat like crazy all the time. Like, I got really self-conscious about wearing T-shirts because they'd always have, like, big wet patches under the arms, even using really strong blocking deodorant.
Yeah.
And both of those are symptoms of something called dysautonomia, which is an autonomic function disorder that goes hand in hand with EDS. It controls things like sweating, your reaction to temperatures, a whole lot of other things.
Oh,
What was the name of that again? Asking for a friend.
Sorry, dysautonomia.
Dysautonomia, okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Lachlan's now immediately going to be Googling that when we finish.
Yeah.
Dysautonomia and POTS often go hand in hand, and I'll be talking about those later on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my periods were really, really heavy, and I had really bad cramps. Went to see a gynecologist probably like 15 or 16, and they ruled out endometriosis and PCOS, and I was like, but why is it this bad?
Yeah.
And it was like, well, I guess that's just normal. No, it's not. I struggled to keep up in PE class. Like, I felt like I was trying my hardest, but like I could, never quite keep up with everybody else. I was always tired, or my legs hurt, or my feet hurt, or I'd have like a lot of trouble trying to catch my breath.
Yep.
That's POTS. But nobody actually noticed that I was hypermobile until after I got a workplace injury in 2012. And that was, I started my apprenticeship in 2005. So what's that? I can't math.
In
7
the past.
years?
Something
Is it
like
7?
that.
I don't know how to count either.
Oh my God. We're doing great, aren't we? Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you really had symptoms for
I really did.
forever.
I have had symptoms my whole life, but nobody's ever put them together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always been, it
Yeah.
sounds like either looked at in isolation or
Yeah.
explained away as,
Like
women's
just
things.
part of growing up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Or-
part of growing up, part
Yeah.
of just being a woman, part of
Or
all
I
of
just
that.
thought it was normal because that was my normal, and I didn't think to
Yeah.
say, hey, do you ever do this?
Yeah.
But no, I got the workplace injury in 2012, and to start with, it was my whole arm, like my shoulder and my wrist and my elbow, but the shoulder and the elbow recovered and the wrist didn't. And so work paid for me to go to a hand therapist, like a specialist.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And she was the first person to say, your wrists are very hypermobile. And so I got some braces called wrist widgets to wear around both wrists so that my wrist wouldn't hyperextend and would have more support while I was baking bread.
So is that kind of like the braces that you see athletes and stuff wear? Is it a similar kind of like supportive?
They're more like straps.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to imagine what they look like, yeah.
I'll have to send you a picture afterwards. But yeah, they're more like straps. The hand therapist was like, I don't understand why you feel better wearing this. This isn't actually designed for this disorder. It was called like golfer's thumb or skier's thumb or something like that. And I said, what does it matter? It works.
Yeah.
So that was the first time that you had like
That was
a
the first
professional
time
say.
that somebody mentioned joint hypermobility to me.
Okay.
Yeah. And then in 2014, I started doing adult ballet classes, and literally at my first class, I'm standing there at the bar. We're doing like the first exercise, and the teacher comes over to adjust my legs because I have my knees locked in backwards, and that's how I stood naturally.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Nobody told me that was not supposed to happen. That's just how I'd always stood. And of course, that had resulted in, like a lot of leg pain, a lot of like back pain, things like that, because I wasn't using the right muscles in my legs to walk around.
Yeah, and the muscles you were using were absolutely exhausted, I imagine. Just
exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. And actually, like, I'm really grateful that she pointed that out because it forced me to retrain and to actually be very aware of how I'm standing now. And so if I notice that I'm starting to sort of lock my knees in backwards, and if you Google hyperextended knees, you'll see what I'm talking about. But if I notice that it's happening, I'll just fix it rather than going on like casually, like nothing's wrong. And it also meant that I did train up the correct muscles, which was very past due.
Yeah.
In 2016, I was diagnosed with a hiatus hernia, which is where the esophagus attaches to the stomach. It widens. And so you can no longer eat a bunch of stuff and not get acid reflux. It's just chronic acid reflux.
God. Okay.
I know. And at the time, like, I was blaming myself, like, well, you got into a job that's full of heavy lifting. This is your fault. Yeah.
Oh.
I know, right?
And that's the last thing you need. You don't need that blame and that guilt and everything. That's
I know.
just so frustrating.
Well, I just thought that I was lifting things incorrectly, even though I had been lifting them properly. Like I'd been using my core and not my lower back.
Yeah.
But I thought that using my core meant that I'd done this to myself. I also noticed that sort of as I hit like age 30, my digestive system started to slow down a lot. And the same thing happened to Mum when she was about that age. And so I thought, okay, well, this happened to Mum. I guess it just happens in our family. And so when I was diagnosed with this hernia, like everything was so flared up that I cut back to a low FODMAP diet just to try and get it under control because, you've got to cut out a lot of things like nightshades and gluten and onion and garlic and that seemed to make everything a lot better. And I couldn't understand why because I'd tested negative for celiac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My question was, how did you manage that? I guess because you weren't celiac necessarily. But yeah, I was wondering how you be a baker and then make sure that you're not. getting gluten in your system accidentally.
Well, breathing it in wasn't really a problem. I mean, you shouldn't breathe in flour anyway because it's bad for you.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to end up with like miner's lung or something as from all these years working with flour, whatever it's called. I probably shouldn't joke about that. Yeah, but how I managed it was just looking at everything that I made and like crying inside because I couldn't eat any of it.
Yeah.
It seems to have sort of largely resolved itself and calmed down, like now that I've been so long eating. I mean, I've relaxed a lot over the years. And now that I did a lot of appointments at the Mantra Clinic at St. Vincent's, which is like the gastrointestinal department. And one of their pelvic floor specialists told me, she said that a lot of my discomfort was coming from the fact that my pelvic floor was extremely tight. And again, I think that's from overcompensating with the muscles.
Yeah.
And that's what was causing everything to back up and then me to have reflux because my stomach wasn't emptying out enough because everything was backed up. And so she put me onto a powder called Osmolax that you mix with like a drink, and Osmo, it's in the name, like it adds more water into your intestine to sort of help keep pushing everything through.
Oh, kind of like a lubricant, I guess.
I guess, yeah. Because, the longer that, like, waste matter spends in your intestine, like, the more water gets leached out of it and the harder it is to push it through. And the nice thing about Osmolax as well is that it's not like taking the sort of laxative that makes you want to go. Like, the name is a bit of a misnomer because it's not actually a laxative. But the important thing is that your body doesn't get used to it and you don't have to take more and more and more to have the same result. It'll just do the same thing every time.
Oh, that sounds great.
I know. But being put onto that meant that I was able to relax the low FODMAP stuff a little bit and put a little bit more gluten back into my diet, although sourdough is probably still better for me, in terms of feeling like full than like white bread or like high fiber bread.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with sourdough. Sourdough's pretty
I love
good.
a good sourdough.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it sounds like you had just so many things going on across the years.
I'm not even done with the list.
I thought you couldn't possibly have still more, you poor thing.
Oh, there is more. There is more. You just don't put it all together until you're in the exercise physiologist office and you're being asked all of these questions. And all of a sudden, your brain's doing that meme with the guy standing in front of the board with like all of the red yarn connecting everything together. Okay, so my periods got even heavier and worse, and it got to the point where like my iron was being affected, and it didn't help that I'm taking Nexium for the reflux. Like I'm going to be on Nexium for life because that they've said I'm not a candidate for surgery. Like the hernia is not bad enough. Yeah, but being on a thing that reduces your stomach acid means that you then have other problems with absorbing nutrients and things.
Yeah.
So I constantly have to have blood tests to check my iron and my B12, and the very heavy periods were really affecting my iron. I had to have infusions more than once.
Oh,
shit.
I know. And now I've got an implant on in my arm, which has really, really helped. So they're not heavy and painful anymore, which, my God, it's a relief.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And a few years ago, this was just a one-off for like a month or two, but I was getting really bad ocular migraines, which is where like you don't have a headache, but you can sort of see an aura in front of your eyes, like if you've looked at a really bright light and then it's like burned into your vision.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was getting those. My doctor was worried enough to send me for an MRI, because they were just so recurrent. And then they just went away again with no explanation.
That is in itself is just as terrifying as them just popping up.
Like, oh God, I know. Yeah.
Them just disappearing. You're like, okay, like I'm grateful, but also like, where did you go? What is happening? Is this the end? What?
I know. And when the MRI came back with like nothing concerning, I was like, well, then what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple more things. I have chronic jaw clenching, TMJ.
Okay.
And I manage that now with Botox from my dentist. She puts it into the masseter muscles and that relaxes them.
Okay.
But that's like TMJ is very, very common with EDS. Again, because, you're overcompensating for a loose joint. And the biggest and most obvious thing to everybody else, as well as me, is that everybody has always told me how young I look for my age and how soft and fine my skin is.
Right.
Like that is one of the classic EDS symptoms, very soft, fine, velvety skin and looking young for your age. And if you'll recall, I actually brought that up in the last episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was one of the examples of like a discussion topic that I brought up on LiveJournal. Like, isn't it weird how young we all look? Yeah. And that's actually like why I wanted to come and talk to you guys about this, because it is so common with autistic and ADHD people that it was a question on like literally every single initial questionnaire that I had to do when I was seeing all these people.
Huh.
Oh, so it was a question
Yes.
like for the specialist before you got into like full big diagnostics.
Yes.
It was,
Have you ever been diagnosed with ADHD or autism? And I'd be like, yeah, both.
Wow.
oh.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating to me purely from like an academic level. Like obviously it sounds just the pits, all of these things that keep happening. But how much of so many different systems in the body are connected to the muscles? Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about it, honestly, because like, of course, your gut health is going to be a problem if your pelvis is so tight that you can't digest the food. Of course. Like,
and also the soft tissues of the intestines as well, just stretching and relaxing.
Yeah. It's incredible. And it's shit, but it's also incredible.
I know, right? And it's exhausting.
Yeah. Oh my God, yeah.
But there's a symptom that I've never displayed, but like a lot of people do, which is having a joint either dislocate or sublux, which is where it slips partially out of place, but it doesn't completely dislocate. And I've never had that happen, thank God. But, you know, like that was actually one of the reasons I would be like, oh, no, maybe I don't have it over the years. But that is a very big concern for a lot of people too. You know, like if you like blink wrong, something might dislocate for some people.
Yeah.
So hypothetically, if you were someone who rolled your ankles like all the time, could that potentially, just asking for a friend, you know, maybe? Because some of these things are really starting to, I'm like, oh.
I am that person, actually. When I first saw my osteo, she looked at my ankles and she said, "You've sprained that one a lot, haven't you?" And I literally said, "How the fuck did you know that?" And then I was like, "Sorry for swearing." But I was just shocked that she could tell.
Yeah,
but also, when I went to the podiatrist earlier this year, she was shocked that I didn't constantly sprain my ankles because of how hypermobile they are.
Oh, because about once a year I have some sort of ankle injury, like a sprain or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's always everyone's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'm like, walking. Literally walking. It's never something impressive or cool. It's literally like, I don't know, I just walked wrong and my ankle slipped and now all of a sudden it's bad.
Yeah. Well, actually, my latest pair of work boots, I bought them because they have that strap that gives extra support around the ankle. And my God, it's made such a difference.
Oh, that's so good to hear.
Yeah.
So is that everything?
Yes.
All added up?
It is an exhaustive list, but yes, that's everything. Oh, no, there was little white bumps on the inside of my heels.
Oh.
They're called pysogenic papules. And what they are is the connective tissue is weakened there, and so the fat underneath is pushing through.
Oh.
That's one of the things that they ask to look for, like when I went and got assessed too.
Right. Jeez, yeah. Oh. No, I just looked up a picture and yes, I was aware of these before.
So with all of that together,
yes,
what was it that made you definitively decide, even after being told so many times that things were unconnected or, you know, that it was just how you were kind of thing, what was it that pushed you to be like, no, fuck this, I'm looking into it, I'm pushing, I'm getting a diagnosis?
Well, yeah, it's been like 10 years of sort of bringing it up with professionals and oh, no, I don't think you could have that. To be fair, the first physio that assessed me, they do a flexibility test called the Beighton test. That's Beighton if you want to Google that, Lachlan. But yeah, because I was baking bread 5 days a week, my hands were too stiff for me to pass the test because they've got one where you've got to touch your thumb to your forearm and they've got another one where you've got to bend your pinky back at a 90-degree angle. And I couldn't do that. Yeah. And also like I was recovering from a sprained ankle, so I couldn't put my hands on the floor because, one of my legs was really tight.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't take that into account. And so that was back in 2014, and I sort of sat on it for years after that. But every so often, something would happen, or somebody online would say something that would, it's like throwing a rock into a pond.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of thing.
Yeah,
mentally, I'd be like, maybe I do have it. And then I'd sort of for years I was busy dealing with the gastrointestinal problems and sort of figuring out, how to do things like meal prepping and checking ingredient labels and all those other really exhausting things that you just do not want to do when you have executive dysfunction and are exhausted.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was taking up a hell of a lot of my time. And I do think that the other thing that sort of made me go, oh, well, I'm doing all right, so I don't need to look into this yet, was the fact that because I was doing ballet and figure skating, I'd built up so much functional strength in my legs, my ankles especially, that I didn't really have any issues until I had to stop during lockdown and my foot started to hurt all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that actually pushed me over the edge, fuck this, I'm going to do it, was I was talking with a friend called Jamie on Instagram about that they've got ME. What is it? Myo something and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So that they've got ME and they were talking about chronic illness, and I replied to their story something like, I've always suspected I have EDS, but, I've just never... everybody always knocks me back. And they sent me a link to a YouTube video by a creator called Ember Green. And the video is called EDS and Why We Misunderstand Disability. And it's a 45-minute video. And I was just getting angrier and angrier the whole time I was listening to it, because literally everything that she said, I was like, that's me. That's me. That's me. Fuck this. That's me. And yeah. So that's what really pushed me, and I sent it to my girlfriend Jesslyn, and I said, you need to watch this, it's me, that this is bullshit. And yeah, so she watched it and said, you should message our friend who is also called Jess, because she... I mean, we're all 80s babies. Can you really, blame us for all being
That's
Jess?
No, it's just funny.
So our friend Jess had posted last year about finally getting diagnosed with hypermobile EDS and with POTS. And so Jesslyn said to me, you should message her and see what advice she has. And my God, that was such a good suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah. She gave me so much valuable information and told me how it all went for her. She warned me that it would take a really, really long time. I think she said that it took a year and a half for her.
Wow.
And a lot of that is just downtime waiting for appointments with a specialist, because they are so backed up. There's so few specialists that really understand EDS and how it presents itself, that they are booked out for months or years. The person that my doctor initially wanted to send me to has a 2-year wait list, and that's after he takes a month to triage your referral. So
Jesus,
I know, but so what she said was that you've got to see this was her experience, by the way. This didn't end up being my experience, which I'll go into later. So you've got to see a rheumatologist to rule out things like fibromyalgia, arthritis, other chronic pain conditions like that.
Yep.
You have to go see a geneticist to rule out other EDS subtypes, because they want to make sure, there's one called vascular EDS,
Okay.
where things can spontaneously rupture inside you, like blood vessels.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
my God. Okay.
Oh yeah, no, it's like a horror movie, isn't it?
Yes.
Like a little
Yes.
ticking time
Love
bomb.
that.
Yeah. And you've got to go to a cardiologist to look into POTS and things like that. And I assumed, because this was the impression that I got from her, that you needed all 3 reports before you could be officially diagnosed. Like a Captain Planet by your powers combined thing.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, after I posted online about actually starting this, I would get messages from other people, because, I've got so many friends who are autistic, ADHD, who've either been diagnosed with EDS or are sort of in the process of it. But I got messages from so many people being like, oh, my rheumatologist appointment was horrible. I turned up to it after waiting for 3 months, and he knew nothing about it. And then I still had to pay $500.
What?
I know. Oh, mine was $470 at the rheumatologist, but I did get $250 back from Medicare, which is still not
okay.
great, but
No.
at least I wasn't fully out of pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But your own experience with getting that diagnosis was significantly easier. We were just talking about it before for the benefit of the listeners.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah, we were talking about this before we started recording, but yours was significantly different.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that was just by chance.
Yeah.
But Jess put me onto an exercise physiologist called Jackie. And, I mean, even Jackie's website says that exercise physiologist is kind of a misnomer for what she does. She's an EDS expert. She has it herself, so she knows what she's looking at. Her kid has it as well. And she has so many specialists sort of in her mental, address book. And so, she can recommend several different specialists, for each thing, like geneticist, cardiologist, whatever, depending on where you are, in Melbourne.
Oh, that's helpful.
Oh, it's so valuable. And so she can't officially diagnose EDS.
Okay.
But what she does is really, really valuable because she'll do the initial assessment and then she'll write it up in a report. And then you can take that report with you when you go to the specialists.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a head start.
Yes. Yeah. And she lays everything out. It's great.
Nice.
So I saw Jackie back at the start of March. She confirmed that I was on the right track, and then I had to wait 2 months for her letter. And that is what she said it would probably take. And during that time, I sort of started looking to find other specialists that could help me, like physio and an osteo, but I'll go into that a bit later. And then, obviously, I did Easter production at work and then was just wrecked. And until probably the end of April, which is when I went on annual leave for my birthday. So went on annual leave, finally got the letter from Jackie and got my referrals to the rheumatologist and the geneticist. And so I sent those off to be triaged, and I included Jackie's letter with them. And about a week later, I got a text message from the rheumatologist's office saying, your referral's been triaged, please call us for an appointment. And so I did that. And I don't know what his wait times are, but I had just the most lucky stroke of lucky strokes because the receptionist said to me, we've had a cancellation on Friday. Would you like that appointment? I was just like, yes, give me that appointment.
Wow.
I know. It was literally 2 days away.
Nice. That's so good.
That's amazing.
I know, right? So I started having a little bit of a panic attack on the way because I was just like, oh, God, what if he thinks I'm lying? What if I'm a big fraud? I mean, obviously that wasn't going to happen because, he had the letter and all of that. But when you've spent the last 10 years being told, oh, no, I don't
well, that's
have
it. Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah. You really start to question yourself. And it's like, well, am I crazy for doing this?
Absolutely,
yeah. I mean, my GP even said to me, why are you trying to pursue this? You seem to be doing just fine. Why go through all of the stress and the cost and everything like that? And I just looked at her and I said, I'm not doing fine.
No, you're in chronic pain every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Yeah, so, the rheumatologist was really lovely. He was one that Jackie had recommended, so he is very EDS savvy. So he goes through all the usual questions, family history, doing the Baton test, looking at my heels, wanting to know if I have stretch marks. He didn't ask to actually see them, which was a relief because I wasn't real happy about the thought of having to strip down.
Fair enough.
Well, that's what Jess told me might happen if, when I went to the geneticist, he'll want to look at your body and stuff like that. And I was just like, oh, do I have to? Yeah. And then what I was not expecting was for the rheumatologist to turn to me and say he could officially diagnose me that day, and that I didn't need to go and see the geneticist and the cardiologist unless I wanted to.
Amazing.
But it wasn't necessary to get a diagnosis.
Wow.
And I really had to fight to not be like, excuse me, what? Fuck.
Yeah, fair enough.
Just take the win. Take the win.
Oh, exactly. I was being very, very calm and chill and just being like, okay, so what do I do next then? Rather than, screaming and flailing like Kermit.
Yeah.
I know. So I left the rheumatologist's office, paid my $470. And then while I was waiting for the lift, I messaged Jesslyn and I was like, he diagnosed me. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, he diagnosed me. I wasn't expecting this. I really didn't know what to do with myself. I was just like so happy.
That's
Really
just such a rare
Yeah.
diagnostic story. I think it's just
I know.
so not at all. And I'm so glad that after, all of those years of
I know.
medical gaslighting and stuff, that you actually had something relatively smooth for once. Expensive,
Oh,
but
God, I know.
for that to have worked out for you.
I do want to point out, though, that it's going to be different for every single person. And he specifically said that I was showing like none of the tells of any of the other ones that you can do a genetic test for. And so that's why he was happy to diagnose me that day. He did say that I could still go see the geneticist, like just in my own time. And get the tests done if I wanted to rule things out for sure. And I may. And I'm also definitely going to go to the cardiologist to look into POTS. But again, like it doesn't feel like I need this. This is like a frantic sort of thing because I have the diagnosis. I don't need the other two to confirm that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there like a treatment or a management plan for EDS going forwards for you? You've got your cool new shoes.
And my $700 orthotics from the podiatrist.
Woohoo!
God, I know. And then I was really mad because I found out after the fact that my health insurance doesn't actually cover it. My credit card certainly got a healthy workout that day, unfortunately. I have paid it off now, but it took a while. So I've got the shoes with the orthotics in them, which, God, like the first night that I did a shift with those in, I was like, this is amazing. I don't have pain. But yeah, like everybody is different, as I keep saying. And so like managing hypermobile or any EDS is going to be different to every single person. Like, some people will use things like joint braces or ring splints or, like a mobility aid, like a wheelchair or a walker or a cane, like daily. Some people will just sort of use them as needed, and like some don't need them at all, but they'll have like ongoing physiotherapy or osteotherapy, to sort of help strengthen and support their hypermobile joints.
That makes sense.
But there's no medication that you can take.
Right.
Except obviously like if you need it, if you have really bad chronic pain, like pain medication. But that's more of like a mitigation thing and not like something that will help make it get better.
So it's basically just working with your body as best you can to support you.
Well, Jackie called it like having like a team around you.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like a little while ago, I shared a meme that was something like, you mean F1 cars get a whole pit crew and I get one jackass with ADHD? I know. And at this point, this jackass with ADHD has a bit of an F1 pit crew, but my body is not an F1 car.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to date myself horribly, but it's more like Onslow's car from Keeping Up Appearances. I'm so glad you both got that.
Oh, yeah. We are that old.
Yeah. Backfiring.
I'm still fresh.
Yeah. And so when I bake, as I said before, I wear the wrist widgets. Or I'll just tape depending on how I feel, because the wrist widgets have they have like a bit of scratchy glue on them that some days I just don't feel like dealing with.
Yeah.
Because it's like two layers glued together, like sandwiched together with glue in the middle to sort of help with the stability. And I get that, but also like why? So I use the wrist widgets, and in the downtime after I saw Jackie, I was Googling around I Googled something like physiotherapist EDS, and what came up was my osteopath Ashton, who is not only in the western suburbs, but has hypermobility herself, and it's become like her passion project.
There you go.
That's so cool.
I know, right? And then Jackie emailed me to say that there's a chronic pain clinic in the western suburbs that I've mentioned, that you'd be interested in going. And so give them a call because that they'd also like to work with you. And I was like, okay, cool. So I have a physiotherapist called Elmi as well, who's at the chronic pain clinic. And so Ashton has given me a bunch of exercises to help with stabilizing my body and just sort of like not constantly hyperextending everything and strengthening things back up. A lot of them actually remind me of like the foot exercises that we used to do in ballet class. And so I'm taking to it really naturally.
Cool.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I mean, they're supposed to be done daily, but I mean, I try. I really do try to be consistent, but I can't always commit to daily, like, fatigue levels, demand avoidance,
Yeah.
getting into bed and then remembering, fuck.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All of that, you get it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But at my last osteo appointment, like, she was really, really happy with my progress. So I feel a little bit less guilty about not being able to do it every single day. Like, at least I'm doing it, you know?
Well, that's all you can do. There's no point doing it all the time and then exhausting yourself and not being able to actually look after yourself in other ways, or spending that time on feeling guilty and things like that. You can only do what you can do, and some is better than none.
Exactly.
I absolutely support you in this. Yes.
Yeah. And I think Ashton sort of gets that, like, nobody's going to do it every single day when we're talking about neurodivergent people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I do with Ashton. And with Elmi, she had me walk around a lot. And she said, your pelvis is dropping on the right and your left leg is the one that's taking the brunt of everything, like you're favoring that leg. And so what we're working on right now is, just like, they're exercises to, like, target very, very specific little muscles, to try and strengthen those up and sort of give me more stability through my hips and things like that. It's actually really interesting that she noticed that, because back when I was ice skating, there was this one thing I couldn't do on my right foot for the life of me without scraping the back of the skate on the ice. Like, it was a turn on the spot on one foot. And my coach would be like, you're dropping your hip. And I'd be like, but I feel like I'm in line.
Yeah.
It feels like my hips are at the same height.
That's interesting.
Like, I couldn't tell. I know, but, like, it was just another one of those, like, connecting the red string, like, across all of the different pieces of paper things.
That's it,
Yeah.
Will any of these, the management of will that help with the things like your dietary stuff, or is that something that you're going to have to deal with?
No, the dietary stuff is another kettle of fish altogether.
Yeah, okay.
But, I mean, I was sort of managing that pretty well on my own anyway. I mean, I've been managing it since 2016, so I'm pretty well, like, good with it. I reckon that if I had all of this diagnosed at once, I would be overwhelmed.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Yeah,
but no, I've had so much time to get used to it and sort of figure out what works for me and what things I can sort of get away with in small amounts without, like, causing too much gastrointestinal distress.
Yeah.
But if anybody wants, like, low FODMAP suggestions or tips or things, I'm totally happy to give them because I have a lot of experience now. Yeah, and the other really good thing about actually having an official diagnosis, and this sort of ties into your question about management plans as well, is that I can ask for accommodations at work because it is a disability.
That makes sense.
And I will say, like, the bakery manager, Nathaniel, is wonderful and had already put, like, all of these things into place already, but it would be great to have them sort of be official, like, if he moves stores or if I move stores. But I don't really think I need to ask for a lot at work, but it would be things like, if the other baker goes away on holidays, I can't bake, like, for all of his shifts.
Yeah.
Like, or, like, for 5 days a week, because that will exhaust me. Or things like, when production gets significantly more, like, say, Christmas and Easter, I can't be on my own. I need help. Just things like that. And like I said, Nathaniel's already agreed to all of that stuff anyway. Like, he has been so supportive. He was so excited when I got diagnosed. He was like, yes, I'm so happy for you.
That's so nice.
Yeah. It says a lot about all the awesome people in my life that, like, literally nobody responded like, oh no, that's terrible. Are you okay? And literally everybody was congratulating me and excited.
That's so wonderful.
I know. Yeah. I know. That made me really happy.
So is the next step to continue in a POTS diagnosis?
Yes, I would like to look into that. I do think that I probably have it, but the other thing that I mentioned before, dysautonomia, and POTS have so many similar symptoms that it would be nice to just figure out, like, do I have one? Do I have the other? Do I have both?
Yeah. For everyone listening who doesn't know, what is POTS?
So it stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Thank you, Wikipedia. What it basically means is that my blood doesn't want to move to where it should, like, quickly enough when I go from sitting to standing, or, like, when I suddenly do, like, a burst of exercise, and then my blood pressure drops and my heart starts to beat faster to try and pump more blood around it. It starts to panic. And so then I wind up either out of breath or getting what I called the head swirlies, which is where like my head spins and occasionally my vision will sort of go black for a second.
Oh, God.
I can't believe I thought that was normal. I mean,
Yeah, fair.
well, I mean, I didn't know anything else, but also, like, I was talking to Jesslyn about it, and I said, you know when you stand up too quickly and you get the head swirlies? And she looked at me like I'd grown another head, and she was like, what are you talking about? And I said, you know, like in cartoons. And then I realized that cartoons are not a benchmark to do all of that.
But also, it's on your TV and it happens, so you're like, oh yeah, that must be a thing that other people relate to, no? Like,
Exactly.
I completely understand looking at cartoons and being like, yeah, all right, that's normal behavior. And then later finding out, oh, no, apparently not.
Well, just to segue a little bit, did you ever like make very exaggerated facial expressions growing up because you'd seen that in cartoons? Because I totally did that.
Yeah, and I still do as an adult.
Yeah.
Mine's more I don't know 90% of the time what my face is doing. So it's potentially making exaggerated facial expressions. I have no idea. I have no control over my face. Like I have no idea. Maybe.
That's the nice thing about wearing a mask all the time now for me.
Yeah.
You know, because like, I mean, apparently my eyes and my eyebrows still kind of give it away, but like the rest of my face is hidden.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, back to POTS. Like I would read about the symptoms of it and I'd sort of rationalize it away like, oh no, I don't think that's me. I don't think I do that. And then I saw someone's reel on Instagram joking about, you know, like that they were emptying like a whole salt shaker into their food and it was like POTS people be like, and it was like, to circle back, the cartoon light bulb going off over my head.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh no. Because literally when I was growing up, like I'd just be like, grind with a salt grinder. And Dad would be there like, you're going to blow up your kidneys if you do that.
Yep.
Like, I put salt on my pizza and Jesslyn's like, why are you salting your pizza? It's so salty already. And I'd be like, it's really not. It's bland.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but it turns out an actual thing. So when we figured that out, like, you know, I got some compression socks and like just to see, you know, I got like one or two pairs off this really cool website that has ones with lots of colors and patterns on them. But we wanted to see if like that would help me at work and it did. Cool. So that kind of confirmed it even more. But no, like how POTS or like suspected POTS or confirmed dysautonomia affects me is that like my hands and my feet will randomly be either too hot or freezing. I crave salt and the head swirlies, which I mentioned. I get fatigued really easily, like in hot weather.
Yep.
And, you know, I'll get a racing heartbeat and out of breath, just seemingly out of nowhere is what it felt like. And back then I was just like, well, it's because you're not fit.
Yeah.
You know, like this is your fault. You know, like you need to get fitter.
Funny
like
how it always seems to come back to that initially and then you learn
the
more.
self-blame. Yeah. You need to do more.
Yeah.
Why are you not doing enough? Yeah, but like at the first supermarket bakery that I worked at, like the tea room and the change rooms were all upstairs. And so I would like haul myself up the stairs and then I'd get to the top and I'd like be gasping for breath and like my vision would be slightly black and I'd be like, well, it's because you're not fit.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes I get like a really bad brain fog as well, depending on like what I've eaten and, you know, what I'm doing. But all of this has been going on since I was a kid and I just didn't realize it. And that thing I mentioned before where Mum's friend said my legs looked kind of purple and splotchy.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's a sign of either POTS or dysautonomia as well.
Okay.
And the same thing happens like with my upper arms, probably my lower arms too, but they've got a bit more of a suntan on them, so you can't really tell. But it's just wild how all of it suddenly like just clicks in your brain and you're like, oh.
What are the next steps for you in terms of getting that diagnosis for POTS?
Okay, well, my referral is currently being triaged with a cardiology place. And once that's been triaged, I don't know if I have to call them back or if they're going to message me, but I'll make an appointment, hope that it's not, 6 months to a year away. Although, like I said, it's less urgent at this point because I've already got the EDS diagnosis.
Sure. Yeah.
And sort of go get assessed by a cardiologist. And if I do get diagnosed with POTS, they can put me on medication that will help with like the drop in electrolytes, which is why we have salt cravings.
Yeah.
And they can put me on medication that helps with that.
That's good.
But in the meantime, I'm drinking this supplement that another friend with POTS put me on called pH 1500.
Okay.
It's meant for marathon runners.
Oh,
I know, but the POTS community have discovered it, and it's amazing. I do recommend it. Precision Hydration 1500 is the name.
I just looked it up.
Yeah, but you just mix it with your drink, and then you drink it. Like, I survived on that during the Easter period at work. If I felt myself starting to like get like a rapid heartbeat or out of breath, I would go like take a swig of this. And I mean, things wouldn't resolve immediately, but I felt so much better than I would have if I hadn't.
That's cool.
Yeah, I know. I was just like, this is witchcraft. This is amazing.
Does it taste better or worse than Hydrolite?
I don't like Hydrolite. I put the pH 1500 into like cordial or something, so it's not. But it's like a fizzy sort of lemon lime taste. It's not bad.
Okay. That's...
But you do have to get used to like the salty taste too.
Right.
See, I really like Hydrolite because of the salty taste.
Nah.
And so
Okay.
I'm well into it. I'm like, yeah, give me that salty orange drink. Yum, 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 yum.
And then you go empty half the salt shaker onto your food.
That's a big one. It's a few things from this episode that are starting to click into place.
You're ticking a few boxes in your brain, Jacinta.
Yep. We might be making some doctor's
Don't
appointments
worry, I
after
will.
this.
I will give you all of my resources and pay it forward from other Jess.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Speaking of resources, you've brought us there. What are the top resources that you'd recommend that we can put in the show notes for everyone else?
Okay. Well, the Ellas_Danlos account on Instagram is really, really good. Last month was actually EDS Awareness Month. And so when I got diagnosed and I called Jesslyn about it, I was like, happy EDS Awareness Month, sweetie. I got diagnosed.
Beautiful.
I know. But that account on Instagram was like that they told people to tag them and then they would, share. You know how Instagram can like have two creators?
Yep.
On a post? Yeah, so they would do that. And so it would like get pushed out to that account's much bigger following. And so there are too many to name. But if you go to the Ellas Danlos account on Instagram and sort of scroll down, you can find a lot of people talking about their experience there.
Right.
They'll talk about their lives, managing the condition, how it's impacted them. On YouTube, Ember Green, who made the video that kicked everything off. She makes some great videos. She did another one where she was talking about the cycle of like unemployment for her because, like she would just get too exhausted masking all the time at work.
Right.
And I was just like, oh, this is too familiar. This is way too familiar. Like everything that she posts is really relatable. I love Ember Green. Like that's the actual account name. Yeah. And other accounts on Instagram that I found really, really valuable are my Osteo Ashton.
Yep.
She's hypermobile herself and she posts reels and pictures and things like infographics, and she's actually started up her own podcast talking about EDS and hypermobility and the way that it can sort of appear with other specialists over on Spotify.
Oh, wow.
We love it.
Yeah, so the podcast is called Not All Textbook.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
it out,
so if you want to listen to actual professionals talking about this instead of, to circle back to that meme, one jackass with ADHD, go and listen to it. It's really good. She answered, I submitted a question for her first episode and she answered it. So that was really cool. I said, what are some of the surprising ways that hypermobility can sort of appear in a person? Mm-hmm. You'll have to go listen to it if you want to know the answer.
Absolutely.
I was just making that body horror face when she answered it. It was not what I was expecting. Yeah. And another professional I've been following for a while on Instagram is Dr. Melissa Coel, Koehl.
Okay.
And she's also a hypermobility expert. She's diagnosed with hypermobile EDS as well. And she posts videos of like how to do Pilates and things like that with EDS.
Oh, that's so good.
Cool. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. No, she's great. And another podcast that I discovered on Instagram but haven't actually listened to yet, but it seems to have really, really good reviews, is called Bendy Bodies.
Bendy Bodies. I love it. It's very fun.
So that's my list of resources for you.
That is
Excellent.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing just all of that, and obviously for sharing your story as well. We really love, having you as a member of the Differently Brained community and having you on as a guest.
Thank you.
You're always so open and lovely, and just you share so much of yourself and what you've learned every single time. So we are so grateful that you pay it forward the way that you do, because, I'm sure it's going to help so many people to make, their processes a little bit easier.
Yes. Well, somebody's got to do it. Like, why should it be difficult for every single generation or like every single person that goes through this?
Absolutely.
And the more that we talk about it and the more that we're open about it, like, the more people are going to help. Like, I got a message from an old friend the other day, and I'm being deliberately vague because it involves her kid. But she was telling me that her kid loves playing a team sport, but really struggles, like just can never quite keep up. That the kid's been diagnosed autistic, and she reckons they probably have ADHD as well, but there's just like the financial barrier with getting that assessed. But the more that she was telling me, I said that could be some kind of either toe walking or EDS. I'm not a professional. Like, don't take anything that I say as gospel, but it is sounding very familiar. Anyway, so she sent me a message the other day that like made me happy cry. Because she was telling me a story about how her kid, their school had done cross country, and they were sort of doing it in batches. And by the time her kid did the cross country, it was getting towards the end of the school day, and they were one of the last people to cross the finish line. And by the time they got to the finish line, the teachers were already packing up, and there was nobody really left to cheer for like the little group of kids that were left behind. Yeah. And then there was something to do with like an upcoming sports day where they really, really wanted to be on the team for this team sport that they're really, really into. I think it's their special interest. But everybody had to try out, and they did not make it onto the team for sports day. And so my friend sent a very long email to the school based on all the information that I'd been sharing, and said, I don't know if you know this, but neurodivergent kids can very often have either toe walking or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or POTS. Like, there are so many things that can affect a kid's performance in PE. And I don't think it's very fair. Like, they're not going to feel good about themselves if, like everybody's already packing up before they cross the finish line. And I was just like, I like happy cried that she had told me that, because, I mean, apparently the school did email back, and they said that they were going to take everything on board and make changes. And I'll believe it when I see it. I really hope they do. But, like, it made me happy cry, like, to think that maybe just shooting my mouth off on Instagram has one primary school out in the eastern suburbs making changes. I really hope that they do.
I hope
That's
so
gorgeous.
Too,
and such a beautiful note to end the show on. So if anybody else, has feedback and wants to send Jess a lovely message after listening to her today, do it, because she really likes it.
Yeah.
I really do. I love hearing from people. I got a handful of messages from listeners after the episode that I did with Mum, and Mum got a bunch of messages from extended family members.
Oh, wow.
That's so sweet. Oh, I love that.
And every time I get a message, I'm just like, oh my God, I helped somebody. This feels so good.
Aww.
This is why I do this.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, no, I'll send you all of those links and things to put in the show notes so that everybody can like make use of them. And if anybody does want to message me wanting to know the details of who I saw, I don't want to flood my exercise physiologist with like a bunch of requests, because I do know that she's moved to working part-time, but I am happy to share everything that other Jess told me.
That's great. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, that's our episode for today, guys, and we'll see you next week, I guess.
Catch you next week, and just bye. I don't know where I was going to go with that.
Differently Brained shares the opinions of individuals and does not consider your personal circumstances. Differently Brained exists purely for information purposes and should not be relied on as health or medical advice. Because no brain is the same, please consult your healthcare professional for your personal medical needs.